So as you might just see, there was a little change to the slide. I'm the ex-International Learning and Development Director at Facebook. I actually resigned on Monday. So Sevda, I'm sorry, I was going to tell you, but I thought you'd cancel my invitation, so I didn't bother. So I'm here now and they can't get me off the stage. Anyway, so my story starts about 3 years ago. I'm at a conference, and I'm not very good at conferences. You know, conferences are full of people who network. I'm not a great networker, I'm more of a mingler. And for the people who don't understand what mingling is, these are the type of people who stand around in the corner with a cup of coffee, just looking at their coffee and like find it difficult to get in conversations with other people. But I'm stood there and this guy comes up to me, and I don't know if anybody recognizes this guy. I know Perry will recognize him. Anybody else recognize this guy? Michael? Yeah, David Clutterbuck. So David Clutterbuck, he's written 60 books on management coaching. He was a founder of the EMCC. And I started talking to him, and he is one of the most knowledgeable person that I've ever met. So if you do ever see this guy, you should go and see him and talk to him. He's fantastic. He can be a little bit politically incorrect at times, but that's okay. And he said to me, he said, that Facebook, that's a funny old place, isn't it? And I said, maybe. I said, why don't you come in and have a look? So he came into our London office and he spent some time there. And he said, there's something interesting happening here and I don't know what it is. So I'm like, right, okay, so what do you mean? He said, I'm not sure, but there's something different happening, something I haven't seen in many or even any organizations before. So I said, David, okay, coming in and do some research with us. So what we decided to do is said, look, David, go and talk to our most high-performing teams in Europe. We'll select 12 teams, and what we're going to do is go and interview them and find out what they're doing, which is making them special. Fabulous. So I was a note taker. I went around with David, and we went to speak to these 12 teams. He went off, he wrote his report. He said, I have the report back, and what we're going to do, I'm going to share the report with you. He said, I found 7 characteristics that are common to all of these high-performing teams, and this is the answer. I'm like, fantastic. So this is my career. So he comes up and he says, right, the first one is this. I'm like, David, 20 grand down the tubes, you know? It's like Jim Walsh has been saying this for years, you know, hire the right people. But what he said is, and it was the nuances that he picked up from these 7 characteristics that were really important. He said, your managers aren't hiring for competence. They're hiring for fit. I said, I don't understand what you mean. He said, they're hiring for fit and they don't know how to explain it. He said, when a manager is hiring, what they're doing is looking at the people in the team around them and they're hiring for those capabilities and those characteristics. They're not hiring for Facebook fit, they're hiring especially for the team fit. And I was talking to Marta from the University of Ljubljana earlier on. She said they have a small team and they do exactly the same thing. And that's fine when a team is small, but as you grow and scale, then it gets much harder. And an example of this is when we were feeding this back to one of the senior leaders, I said, well, what type of people do you hire? He said, well, we have a rule, do not hire assholes. And I'm like, cool, but what does one look like to you and what does one look like to me? And is it different? And how do you scale that, you know? So first one is hire the right people. The second one was enjoyment and fun. What he saw in these teams, he called it fizz and buzz. So fizz was the work that they were involved in, and buzz was the people they were working with. So they enjoyed both, and they got energy from not only the work, but the people as well. Change is like breathing. In all of these teams, they welcomed it. Not only did they welcome it, they thrived on change. Nothing stayed the same, and they weren't scared of change. And it just became natural to the teams that they would expect change and move with it and constantly change themselves. Again, obvious, right? Trust and respect. However, the nuance for this was when we spoke to, I think there were 3 teams that had brand new people. The actual leader of the team said, look, we got some new people. Do you want them to come along? And David's like, absolutely, bring them along. And we looked at those people and we spoke to those people and we said, what's different about this team? And they said, we immediately received trust and respect in the team. We weren't there and we didn't have to build credibility. The team immediately expected us to do stuff, and they immediately expected us to have ideas, share knowledge, and contribute to the team as well. And they said that made a huge impact. Again, obvious, clear goals. However, the nuance here is that the goals were set at the right level so that the teams could work out how to get there themselves. If the goals are too high, it's just too nebulous. If the goals are too low, they become task lists. Where the leaders were getting this right was setting the goals at the right level, which allowed the teams to find their way there. Jim just mentioned it, a positive view of failure. So, it's not overall failure. The team knew they had to succeed, but they knew they were going to fail on the way. And they expected to fail, and they celebrated failure, and they never asked the question about who. They asked the question about how and what went wrong and how do we get better. And they didn't spend too much time on reviewing what happened in the past. Their idea was we will never be in that position again. Our context has changed and therefore we can just move on. So they did some sort of postmortems, but not big, deep postmortems. They were just moving really quickly. And it's a big thing in Facebook. What we do is that we encourage people to find jobs that they love. Now, it's called work for a reason, right? So there are going to be certain tasks that you dislike. I think in every job there is. However, if you can give people 70 to 80% of their time spent on something that they're passionate about, then the magic really starts to happen. And what these leaders were doing, they were having real good conversations with their teams to find out what it was they were passionate about. Not just what they were good at, but what they were passionate about. And I'm like, yeah, that's all good. Like, we've heard this stuff before, and there's nothing really new there. He said, however, when this comes together, he said they're like complex adaptive systems. I said, David, I have no clue what you're talking about. What do you mean by that? He said they're like a virus. Teams become like a virus. They start looking for the most impactful work, and they go after it without anybody or any interference from leadership or management or anybody else. And therefore, these teams can then go and do work without anybody getting in the way. The other thing that he said is that when you think about the previous thoughts about team building, so if you take Tuckman, which is the forming, storming, norming, or you take Lencioni, which is like trust, conflict, commitment, etc., they're all linear. He said your teams are not able to go through a linear process. They're changing too quick. To give you an example, we scaled from 11,000 people to over 36,000 people in 3 years. And therefore, teams were changing all of the time. So the analogy we have is that instead of it being like a linear process, you have a team which is like a circular process. So what we decided to do is to think, right, okay, so let's think about these 7 different areas, and we'll start working on helping managers to be better at these 7 different areas. However, when you think about a team, it doesn't look like that. And if a team can build out this wheel to be bigger, it'll go faster. But usually teams look like this. So they'll be strong in one area and less strong in another area. However, if you think about it, the wheel will still go round, even though it might be a little bit bumpy. So we then designed work and interventions to help managers identify, first of all, where was the area, which are the characteristics that they were lacking, and then giving them some support on how to get better at that so that their wheel wouldn't be as bumpy. Fab. We were doing some good work. So we're about a year into it, and we're working through this. And we thought, right, okay, so we've done this in EMEA. I wonder if it's the same in the US, and I wonder if it's the same in Asia Pacific. So what we did, we said, David, go over to the US, interview 24 of our top teams over there, and see what you come back with. Cool. He did 12 in APAC as well. He said it's the same. He said the 7 characteristics are the same in teams all over Facebook. He said, but I found another one. He said, I didn't see this in EMEA, but when I went to the US, I found it. He said, I think it's the most important. So I was like, wow, okay, what is it? And what he came back with the 8th characteristic is the safety of the leader. So if you think about the wheel analogy, the leader is the axle. And when we say the safety, this is the confidence. Because if you think about those characteristics, when a leader starts to lose their confidence, first of all, they don't recruit people who are better than themselves. What they do is that they recruit people who are worse than themselves. Failure becomes a lot harder for a leader to think about if they're losing their confidence. Fizz and buzz disappears away from the team as the leader becomes more stressed. And what we see when we've reflected on them and we've seen leaders fail in Facebook, this is usually what happens. The safety of the leader then starts to diminish, and the wheel goes right out of sync. Now, what I'd like you to do is just watch the wheel for about a minute and keep saying, I love Facebook, I love Facebook. I'll have to turn it off. I was looking at it early on. I was like, whoa, that's really scary. But the safety of the leader is really important. I'm going to have to stop that now. So 2 years ago, my team changed. We used to think about workshops. We used to think about other types of L&D interactions, and we turned to teams. And we have been focusing on teams for the last 2 years. And it's made an incredible difference to how L&D is seen and the impact that we're having. This is the Deloitte 2018 Global Human Capital Trends. You can find it. You might have read it. And what that is saying is the biggest trend for HRDs and business leaders is about teams. And so what did we do? So my team now, 90% of their work is around facilitated team development. We look at individual parts of an organization. This isn't like sheep dip. This is like we pick out a specific team and we go after that team. It's not one intervention. If we have a leader come to us and say, hey, listen, I have an offsite, we'd like to do something, come and entertain us, we don't do it. What we say to leaders is if we're going to get into an engagement with yourself, it's probably going to last between 3 and 9 months. And there will be a number of different things, solutions, whatever, that we will do. And it's going to take more work for you. That's the biggest thing and only thing we can guarantee before we start out. We then go into live development, the holy grail of L&D, the 70% that people keep talking about. We are there with the leaders. We're there with their team as they're developing. We're in their team meetings. And we are watching them as they develop. We start off with the objectives of what the leader's going to try and do, and in 6 or 9 months' time, we measure against that. And it's almost a slam dunk, because as we go along, we're always diagnosing what's happening, we're designing new stuff, and then we're delivering it. So it's almost impossible to fail, because you're constantly changing dependent on the need of the team. And it's only initiated at key performance times. So again, this isn't like like we're going to take everybody on a journey. So let me tell you about those key times that we think are really important. The first one is new leader. We've had a lot of new leaders. We know that, well, I think everybody knows that when you join an organization, it can be difficult. And if there's one time you might lose your confidence, it could be when you're new. And we saw what happens when new leaders lose their confidence. So supporting new leaders is really important for us. Or if there's been a big change of personnel in a team, so maybe there's been 2 teams brought together, that could be another time that we would help. Teams in transition, so if teams are making big changes, changing maybe a project or something you've been working on, as Jim alluded to, something you could be working on for 12 months in Facebook could be scrapped. Then that's a big transition, and we help teams that are going through that type of thing. Baha, you mentioned in your great musical session, 75% of cross-functional teams are dysfunctional. Yeah, it's difficult. And if you're going to get a lot of work done, then you probably need to work cross-functionally. And then the last one is teams in trouble. Dysfunctional teams, you can call them whatever you want. But usually something's gone wrong. Usually there's a lack of respect. There's a lack of trust. There's something that's happened. And we use this cost model on the left-hand side to decide what we're going to do and if we're going to get involved. So the C stands for complexity. See, these 4 things don't happen on their own in isolation. You could have a new leader coming into a team in transition, needs to work cross-functionally, and there's stuff going on. So dependent on the complexity. The O stands for opportunity. So I don't want to be hierarchical, but in all honesty, usually the biggest opportunity is with the most senior teams. So if we have an opportunity to make a bigger difference, a bigger impact, that's where we'll go. The S stands for severity. How long has this been going on? Is this new? And if it is, it's probably not too difficult to fix. But if it's pervasive, it's been there for 12 months, then it needs work, you know? And then the T is like the time. Believe me, this work takes time. So we would start off by interviewing everybody on the team, and then we would actually start to diagnose and design from there. The last thing we did is that we knew we couldn't scale all of the people who needed our help, so we built a toolkit with 15 different exercises that managers could use themselves. And that's just an example of one of them. This last slide is my favorite poster in Facebook. It says, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And what I did is that I resigned to try and go and help people do the work that I've been doing. I'm not here to sell my company because I haven't got one. I've only been unemployed for 2 days. I'm not unemployed. I'm still here till April, so anybody wants me to sign something, I'm probably less like holding the budget as well. So get in contact, and that's it. Thank you very much.